There are paintings that decorate a wall, and there are paintings that refuse to remain silent. Guernica belongs to the second kind. It does not ask for admiration in the usual way. It demands attention. It shakes the viewer before a single historical fact is explained. Even people who know nothing about modern art often feel that something inside this image is broken, screaming, collapsing. That is the strange power of Picasso's Guernica. It is not simply a famous artwork. It is a wound turned into image. At first glance, the painting may seem confusing. There is no peaceful landscape, no comforting perspective, no clear center where the eye can rest. Instead, the viewer enters a fractured world of bodies, light, terror, and distortion. A horse twists in agony. A bull stands like a dark witness. A mother cries over her dead child. A fallen figure lies broken below. Faces are stretched by pain. Mouths are open in silent screams. Everything seems to happen at once, as if time itself has exploded. And that is exactly why the painting remains unforgettable. It does not show war as a distant event. It makes war feel immediate, intimate, and unbearable. To understand why Guernica became one of the most powerful anti-war images in history, we have to begin not with the canvas itself, but with the world that produced it. In the 1930s, Spain was tearing itself apart in a brutal civil war. This was not only a battle between armies, it was a struggle over the future of the country, over power, ideology, and survival. On one side stood the Republican government. On the other side were the nationalists, led by General Francisco Franco. The conflict drew attention far beyond Spain, because many saw it as a warning of something larger approaching across Europe. The Spanish Civil War became a testing ground for modern violence. Foreign powers became involved. Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy supported Franco. The Soviet Union supported the Republican side to a degree, and volunteers from many countries joined the fight out of political conviction. What happened in Spain was no isolated tragedy. It was a sign of the catastrophe that would soon engulf the continent. The cruelty, the bombings, the ideological hatred, the destruction of civilians. All of this pointed toward the future of modern warfare. Then came the event that would echo around the world. On April 26, 1937, the Basque town of Guernica was bombed. The attack was carried out largely by the German Condor Legion, acting in support of Franco's forces. 4 hours, explosives and incendiary bombs rained down on the town. Buildings were destroyed. Fire spread. Civilians were killed and injured. Panic filled the streets. The attack shocked observers, not only because of the destruction itself, but because it symbolized a terrifying new reality. Civilians were no longer accidental victims standing near the battlefield. They had become deliberate targets within it. News of the bombing spread quickly, and reports described horror in terms that could not easily be forgotten. A town of cultural and symbolic importance had been attacked from the sky. Families were apart. Streets were reduced to bad. The psychological impact was enormous. Guernica was not the largest bombing in history, but it became one of the most symbolic. It showed the world what terror from the air could mean. It revealed how modern warfare could erase the line between soldier and civilian, between front line and home. At that moment, Pablo Picasso was living in Paris. He was already one of the most famous artists in the world, but fame alone does not explain what happened next. Picasso had been commissioned to create a large mural for the Spanish Pavilion at the Paris International Exposition of 1937. At first, he struggled to find a subject. He had the space, the importance, the expectation, but not yet the image. Then the bombing of Guernica changed everything. Suddenly, the project was no longer a formal commission. It became an emergency of conscience. Picasso didn't paint a documentary scene. He did not recreate the town with geographical precision. He did not fill the canvas with uniforms, flags, or military maps. Instead, he made a radical decision. He transformed the suffering of Guernica into a universal visual language of pain. That choice is one of the reasons the painting still speaks so powerfully today. It is rooted in a specific event, but it is not trapped inside that event. It becomes larger. It becomes a statement about violence itself. The scale of the work is crucial. Guernica is enormous. Standing before it is not like looking at a small framed picture in a quiet corner of a museum. It feels closer to entering a space of grief. The figures are large enough to confront the viewer physically. Their anguish cannot be reduced to a detail. You do not casually glance. You face it. And in that confrontation, the painting begins to operate almost like a stage where human suffering is frozen at its most intense moment. Another striking decision was Picasso's use of black, white, and gray. There is no bright color to soften the impact, no warm tones to offer relief. The monochrome palette makes the painting feel cold, severe, and merciless. It also recalls newspaper photographs, connecting the work to the modern media through which many first learned about the bombing. The result is both artistic and journalistic, symbolic and immediate. Guernica feels like a nightmare in a headline at the same time. But the painting does not reveal itself all at once. The more you look, the more disturbing it becomes. The Horus at the center appears wounded and deceiving, its body pierced and contorted. The bull has often been interpreted in different ways, as brutality, as Spain itself, as darkness, as Indra. The grieving mother with her dead child evokes images of religious lamentation, yet here there is no comfort of salvation. The fallen warrior below still clutches a broken sword, and near it appears a small flower, fragile and almost easy to miss. Even in devastation, Picasso leaves a trace of something that refuses to disappear completely. That tension between total destruction and stubborn survival is one of the deepest forces inside Guernica. It is not merely a painting of death. It is a painting of horror, witnessed, remembered, and refused. If the first impact of Guernica comes from chaos, the second comes from structure. The painting looks explosive, but it is not random. Picasso arranged the figures with extraordinary control, creating a composition that feels unstable and deliberate at the same time. This is one of the secrets of its power. The viewer experiences panic, but the artist never loses command. Every scream, every angle, every broken limb is placed to intensify the emotional force of the whole. The central area of tea painting is dominated by the horse, a creature that seems to embody pure suffering. Its mouth is open, its tongue sharp like a blade, its body stretched in a way that feels both animal and human. The horse is not only a victim, it becomes a visual center of agony, a figure through which pain radiates outward. Around it, the other forms seem to echo and amplify that pain, as if the entire composition were vibrating from the shock of violence. To the left stands the bull, perhaps the most debated symbol in the work. Picasso himself was never eager to lock his symbols into a single explanation, and that refusal matters. Great art often survives because it cannot be reduced to one neat answer. Some have seen the bull as cruelty and brute force. Others have read it as a symbol of Spain, proud and ancient, watching its people suffer. Some interpret it as emotional distance, an almost terrifying calm in the middle of disaster. What makes the bull powerful is precisely this uncertainty. It does not explain the tragedy, it deepens Italiano. Beneath the bull is one of the most devastating images in the painting. A mother holds her dead child and cries toward the sky. Her head is thrown back, her mouth opened in a shape of absolute grief. This is not sorrow made elegant. It is sorrow stripped raw. Many viewers are reminded of religious images of the Virgin mourning Christ, but Picasso removes any promise of redemption. There is no sacred peace here, no divine answer waiting behind the suffering. What remains is the unbearable fact of loss. On the right side of the canvas, women flee, burn, and cry out. One figure leans from a window, holding a lamp into the darkness. Another appears trapped in flames, her arms lifted in a gesture that feels like prayer and terror at once. Another rushes forward as if searching for escape in a world where escape no longer exists. These women are not passive decorations around the center. They are active carriers of the painting's emotional rhythm. Their gestures push the eye across the canvas and turn private suffering into collective catastrophe. Below, near the ground, lies the broken warrior. His body is shattered, his hand severed, his sword broken. Yet even here, Picasso refuses to leave only despair. From the warrior's hand and broken weapon emerges a small flower. It is one of the tiniest elements in the entire painting, and yet it carries enormous weight. In a work dominated by screams, ruin, and death, that fragile flower suggests that destruction is never the entire story. It does not cancel the tragedy. It simply insists that violence cannot fully erase the possibility of renewal. Then there is the light. One of the strangest and most haunting features of Guernica is the way illumination works inside it. At the top appears a harsh, glaring bulb, almost like an unblinking eye. Near the center right, The woman with the lamp brings another source of light into the scene. These lights do not comfort the figures. They expose them. Many critics have seen in the electric bulb a symbol of modern technology, cold and detached, linked to the machinery of war. The lamp, by contrast, feels more human, more intimate, almost like a fragile search for truth amid devastation. Whether or not Picasso intended such a strict opposition, the contrast is powerful. One light watch, the other seeks. This is where Guernica becomes more than a painting about one bombing. It becomes a meditation on modernity itself. The 20th century promised progress, science, speed, innovation, and rationality. Yet the same century also brought mechanized slaughter, aerial bombing, industrial death, and forms of destruction on a scale earlier generations could barely imagine. In Guernica, modern form and modern horror collide. Cubist fragmentation, sharp geometry, and fractured space are not used here for playful experimentation. They are used to express a world that has been violently broken. That is why the painting feels so different from older battle scenes in art history. Traditional paintings of war often included heroism, victory, national pride, or noble sacrifice. Even when tragic, they could preserve a sense of order. Guernica rejects that inheritance. There are no triumphant generals, no glorious flags, no clear enemy to gaze at and condemn from a distance. There is only the experience of devastation as lived by bodies under attack. Picasso removes the romance of war and leaves the viewer with its psychic truth. The style matters just as much as the subject. Picasso had spent years developing visual languages that broke objects into fragments, shifted perspective, and challenged naturalistic representation. In Guernica, those experiments find a terrible purpose. Fragmentation is no longer just an artistic method. It becomes the form of trauma. Bodies are splintered because reality has been splintered. Faces are distorted because ordinary vision is not enough to contain extraordinary pain. The painting does not look broken by accident. It looks broken because it is telling the truth about a broken world. And yet, for all its horror, Guernica is not visually dead. It pulses with movement. Diagonals cut across the surface. Bodies twist and overlap. Open mouths, extended limbs, and sharp angles create a rhythm of alarm. The eye moves rapidly from one crisis to another. There is no stable refuge, no calm corner in which to rest. This restless energy is one reason the painting continues to affect viewers so strongly. It does not merely represent suffering. It reproduces something of its tension inside the viewer. Picasso once resisted overly precise explanations of his symbols because he understood something important. A work like Guernica should not become smaller than the experience it confronts. If every symbol had a single official meaning, the painting would become a puzzle with an answer key. Instead, it remains open, and because it remains open, each generation returns to it with fresh urgency. People have seen in it fascism, state violence, civilian trauma, exile, grief, resistance, propaganda, and memory. None of these readings completely exhaust a work. That is exactly why it hardens. Guernica does not tell us only what happened in one place in 1937. It shows us what happens whenever human beings are crushed by organized violence and the world is forced to look. After its creation, Guernica did not remain a silent object hanging passively on a wall. It began a second life as a political and moral force. First displayed in 1937 at the Spanish Pavilion of the Paris International Exposition, the painting immediately carried a burden larger than art alone. It represented the suffering of Spain during the Civil War, but it also stood as a warning to the rest of the world. Those who saw it were not simply being invited to admire Picasso's genius. They were being confronted with a message. This is what violence does. This is what modern warfare looks like when it reaches ordinary people. The Spanish Pavilion itself was deeply political. It was designed to draw international attention to the Republican cause at a time when Spain was fighting for survival. Guernica appeared there alongside other works, documents, and visual statements, meant to make the global public understand the stakes of the conflict. The painting was part of a call for conscience. Yet even in that charged setting, it did something rare. It did not depend on slogans. It did not need long explanations. Its visual language cut through ideology and struck directly at human feeling. After Paris, the painting traveled It was exhibited in different countries and became a tool for raising awareness and support. This journey matters. Guernica was not born to remain local. From the beginning, it circulated beyond Spain, allowing the suffering of one bombed town to become a global symbol. In doing so, it helped redefine what political art could be. Rather than offering simple propaganda, it combined formal innovation with moral intensity. It proved that avant-garde art could be emotionally direct, historically engaged, and publicly consequential. During the years that followed, Spain fell under the dictatorship of Francisco Franco. Picasso made it clear that Guernica should not return to Spain while the country remained under authoritarian rule. That decision transformed the painting into more than an artwork. It became a kind of exile, like many people driven from their homes by war and repression. Guernica itself lived away from the nation whose pain had inspired it. For decades, it remained outside Spain, carrying with it the unresolved memory of civil war, dictatorship, and loss. For many years, the painting was housed at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. There, it reached generations of international viewers and expanded its meaning even further. The world changed, wars multiplied, and Guernica continued to speak. People looked at it through the lens of the Second World War, the Holocaust, the bombings of cities, the Cold War, Vietnam, and later conflicts. Every new era of violence seemed to return the painting to relevance. It was no longer only about Guernica. It had become one of the great universal images of civilians suffering under war. This universality is one reason the painting has been quoted, referenced, reinterpreted, and invoked so often. Artists, activists, historians, and ordinary viewers have used Guernica as a visual shorthand for outrage against destruction. It appears in books, documentaries, classrooms, posters, and protests. Its figures have entered cultural memory. Even people who have never stood in front of the original often recognize the crying mother, the wounded horse, the fractured body. Few paintings in modern history have achieved that level of symbolic presence. One of the most striking examples of Guernica's continuing political power came much later, when a tapestry version of the painting displayed at the United Nations gained attention during moments of international crisis. The image had become so associated with the condemnation of war that its presence in a diplomatic setting carried enormous symbolic weight. This is the extraordinary afterlife of the painting. It did not remain trapped in the artwork. It entered public conscience. When Franco died and Spain eventually transitioned toward democracy, the question of Guernica's return became more than logistical. It became historical and emotional. Where did the painting belong? What did it mean to bring it back? When he finally returned to Spain in 1981, the event was charged with significance. This was not merely the transfer of a masterpiece. It was felt as a gesture of historical repair, incomplete and complex, though any such repair must be. The painting came back to a country that was still wrestling with memory, silence, and the legacy of dictatorship. Today, Guernica is housed in the Museo Reina Sofia in Madrid, where it continues to draw viewers from around the world. And this raises an important question. Why does it still affect people so deeply? Why does a painting rooted in 1937 still feel alive in the 21st century? Part of the answer lies in its refusal to become comfortable. Guernica does not act into decorative respectability. It remains jagged, wounded, accusatory. It does not allow the viewer to settle into distance. Another reason is that the world has not outgrown the conditions that made the painting necessary. Civilians are still bombed. Cities are still shattered. Children are still killed in conflicts they did not create. The language of war continues to promise necessity, strategy, and victory, while the human body continues to pay the price. Guernica endures because it tells a truth that history keeps confirming. Technology changes, weapons change, politics change. The screen does not. There is also something important about the painting's emotional honesty. Guernica does not offer easy consolation. It does not intend that suffering becomes beautiful simply because it is represented by a great artist. The painting is magnificent, yes, but its magnificence lies partly in its refusal to glamorize what it shows. It remains difficult. It remains painful. It remains morally urgent. That honesty is rare, and viewers feel it, even if they cannot immediately explain it. At the same time, the painting is not only about despair. Its endurance itself is a kind of response to violence. The bombing sought to destroy a town and terrorize a population. Guernica The painting turned that destruction into memory that could not be erased. It turned a crime into a witness. It insisted that suffering would be seen, remembered, and carried forward. In Tatsensei, the artwork resists the logic of war. War tries to reduce lives to rubble and statistics. Art, at its best, restores presence to what power tries to erase. That is why Guernica remains one of the greatest paintings ever made. Not because it is famous, not because it is large, note D, because it belongs to Picasso. It remains great because it achieves something almost impossible. It takes a specific historical atrocity and turns it into a permanent language of human grief, terror, and resistance. It makes the invisible visible. It gives form to the scream. And Don Sesshin, it is very hard to forget. Guernica is not a painting that ends when you walk away from it. It follows you. It lingers in the mind because it speaks to something larger than art history. It asks what kind of world human beings create when ideology, power, and technology are severed from compassion. It asks what remains of innocence under bombardment. It asks whether witnessing can itself be a form of resistance. And it leaves those questions unanswered in words because it has already answered them in image. That is the final achievement of Guernica. It does not merely represent tragedy. It becomes memory against forgetting.